Andrew's photography. Without Andrew's photography, this would be pretty much a waste of time. What I want to do to begin with is to share with you why Barnes Common, Friends of Barnes Common and butterfly conservation are inextricably linked for me. About the time my husband and I moved to Barnes in about 2013, and about the time I retired from paid working life, I went to a presentation about the work of butterfly conservation. The chief executive at the time showed a photo of a typical British countryside like this one. Green fields, rolling hedgerows, and look at that lovely landscape, and all beautifully emerald green. You could almost hear the audience sigh with appreciation. And then he hit us with the truth. This is an ecological desert. I was stunned by this statement. I had been conscious of seeing fewer butterflies flying around over the last decades. The moth snowstorm in my car headlights had become a memory. I just hadn't realized we'd created ecological deserts around us in our own country. But it hadn't always been like this. Here am I on the left. The age of about 8 in 1960, with the white butterfly net my father made for me. And armed with my net, I would go out wandering on the rough ground beyond our garden in Surrey. And the village boys would shout at me, "You won't find any fishes in there." But I ignored them as I became absorbed in my own world of clouds of blues, skippers and coppers. Miriam Rothschild, the great scientist, described butterflies as dream flowers which have broken from their stalks and escaped into the sunshine. Her sentence perfectly described my experience those tens of summers ago. But now, reports from worldwide speak of insect apocalypse since the 1970s. There are so few butterfly species, some 59 in the UK, that we notice very quickly when their numbers fluctuate. Butterflies and moths are bellwethers of changing conditions. They respond rapidly and sensitively to subtle habitat or climate changes. And in their presence or absence, butterflies and moths act as representatives for the diversity and responses of other wildlife. And butterflies and moths are some of the hardest hit amongst the insects. Since 1976, when butterfly conservation first started making records, butterfly abundance in the UK across all species has declined by 50%. And the 900 species of larger moths have declined by 33%. So my concern is, okay, lots of people have seen butterflies today, which is great, but how many people actually see butterflies and moths with them declining? And I worry about this. If people don't see butterflies, they won't care about them and they won't look after them. And I want more people to see more butterflies more often, which is why I agreed to become the chair of butterfly conservation, because that's my mantra. More people, more butterflies, more often. And also why I'm a volunteer recorder with Friends of Barnes Common, also for butterfly conservation. And as you can see, if you're not covered up with all the pictures, I've swapped the butterfly net for butterfly binoculars, which have also revolutionized my ID skills. This is a familiar picture. So we in the UK, and it's distressing to say this, now live in one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. 189th out of the 218, according to the 2018 Living Planet report from the Worldwide Fund for Nature. So 189th out of 218. And 50% of our population has no access to green space in any 1 week. So Barnes Common is therefore a precious landscape. Cars, yes, urban, suburban sort of, but no industrial agriculture and no industrial developments, no pesticides and no fertilizers. So that's setting you up for the story. And so here it begins, one wet March day. Well, in fact, it started a bit before that because soon after we moved to Barnes, I went along to one of the Barnes charity open mornings and migrated naturally, as a butterfly person would, to the FOBC stand. I asked Mike Hillsley whether anyone was monitoring the butterflies on the common. He said not yet, and put me on to the man in the center of the picture, Adrian Podmore. Adrian sussed out my commitment to butterflies, and because he knows the common's wildlife so well, he and Bill Downey from Butterfly Conservation's Surrey and Southwest London branch together proposed a butterfly monitoring route, which is called a transect, across the common. So in March 2016, here we are in the rain, Stephanie and me with Adrian, and we were about to walk the proposed transect. No butterflies, of course, that day. So what is a transect? Transect is a set route walked once a week for 26 weeks in the year. So then between April the 1st, which is tomorrow, and the 30th of September, you can actually walk in and record in March and in October. And I did walk yesterday because I know that the days coming up are going to be colder. So I will record for yesterday. While walking, we count the number of adult butterflies within a virtual box 2.5 meters on either side of ourselves and 5 meters ahead on the path. The butterflies, of course, need to be flying or basking, otherwise we won't know they're there. So we walk only on warm and mostly sunny days around midday. Quite exacting conditions some weeks in this country. Stephanie and White and I are the initial transect buddies. We are now a group of 5 committed walkers. We cover for each other so that we record each week unless the weather is below minima. The Barnes Common transect on the left is a 3-kilometer walk bordered by Ranelagh Avenue on the north and the railway line to the south through areas of lowland acid grassland and secondary woodland. The Orchard transect, which is at the bottom right, once the former goods yard, is led by Janice Harris, who's here tonight. Janice started last year, and FOBC's own Will Dartnell leads a 3rd transect around the Leg of Mutton. So the transects on Barnes Common are breeding, which is great. For me, it has been a lovely way to meet local people with similar interests and a great way to get to know the common. I also find watching nature intently for several hours a meditational and restorative experience. But where do the records end up? We upload each week's records onto the UK Butterfly Monitoring website. This database records the abundance and distribution of populations of butterflies going back to 1976. Since there are over 3,000 transects and other surveys over the whole UK, we build up an understanding of butterfly populations. Butterfly conservation uses the data to build trends and indicators, which are then used as evidence for influencing policy in the UK and also for reporting on the state of nature. And of course, this is deeply important with the new environmental bills going through. Our recording in Barnes since 2016 has shown us what an important site London Barnes Common is. 27 butterfly species we log each year. Nature under our noses and in London. Indeed, we probably see more butterflies in Barnes than some of our friends in the so-called countryside. Places like Barnes Common are indeed important, and as I said, precious. These are the totals over the last 4 years. In 2020, we didn't walk the Barnes Common transect because social distancing made it almost impossible. But I had, as I told some of you, I had the first walk yesterday. Lots of brimstone, small white, comma and peacock. I gather orange tips are out today, which is great. The Barnes Butterfly League winners are Meadow Brown, Small Essex Skipper, Gatekeeper, Large and Small Whites, Speckled Wood, Small Copper, Holly Blue and Orange Tip. The lowest scores are Small Tortoiseshell, Marbled White, Painted Lady, Large Skipper, Ringlet and Brown Argus. And in fact, last year, Janice did walk the orchard from July to the end of September. and she recorded 19 species and 178 total individuals. And I think the orchard is a lovely spot, and I stood in for her when she was away one week, and I recorded marbled white and painted lady on one day, so I was very privileged. This is a year chart. In 2018, Butterfly Conservation held its 50th anniversary event on Barnes Common, thanks to Friends of Barnes Common being keen to partner us in this. We couldn't have done it without them. And Butterfly Conservation produced this flight chart for the event, which we handed out. And it shows the flight times of the Barnes butterfly species and summarizes some of their characteristics. It's actually a jolly useful sheet. And it gives you an idea when you might most likely to see certain species. But of course, that varies from year to year according to the weather. And now we come to what we've been waiting for. And I must at this point, the tribute and thanks to Andrew Wilson, our own resident photographer. I take some pics on my iPhone, but nothing to compare with Andrew's. And I've been indulgent in showing his photographs to the best advantage. So I'm tried to have them as large screen shots. Thank you, Andrew. And as I said earlier, this talk would be pretty pointless without any pictures. I have ordered the slides, so you can imagine you're going to see 27 species a slide, according to the order through the year when the butterflies emerge, more or less. Although, of course, depending on whether they're single brooded or several broods, the flight periods will overlap. A male brimstone like this was my first butterfly of this year, which I saw on the 10th of March, flying down our street, Castleknow. This species hibernates as an adult and therefore emerges as soon as the weather is warm enough. And it's out in force this week. It's a beautiful shot with the female sort of pale green settled and the male, who's a luscious buttercup yellow, is flying in. Comma, small tortoiseshell and peacocks also hibernate as adults, which is why we see them early when the weather gets warm. So somebody was saying that they've seen peacocks. Yesterday I saw a peacock, also saw a comma, another adult hibernator. This is obviously, peacocks have two broods, and this is a second brood because of course it's on butterfly bush. Butterfly bushes aren't usually out at this time of year. In fact, they're not. When you're seeing these butterflies, peacocks flying, they've got a very black underside. And so they're strong flyers and they appear quite black when they're flying. And that tends to tell you whether it's one of these. These lovely butterflies. Also this one could be out now. And somebody told me yesterday saw one on Hutchinson Bank near Croydon. And this one is from the second brood. These have had dramatic declines. It is thought that it may be a parasitoid fly that has come into England as a result of climate change. These butterflies, they have a gliding flight and they sort of whir from time to time, and they tend to track up and down an area of field or whatever. But they're just such beautiful butterflies. This is a comma. I didn't see many of these as a child. And this is a good story. Their numbers have been increasing, probably because of climate change. They have a typical skimming flight, and you can see that sort of burnished orange when the wings are flat out. They tend to have quick changes of direction. So it's quite a typical flight. And then, of course, the reason it's called a comma, it's because of this underside. Can you see my my cursor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Good. Great. Good. Now somebody's seen Andrew saw an orange tip today. Well, here we go. Here's the male on the left. These So we're actually coming now to the white butterflies, what we call the white butterflies. And they can be rather quite a bit of fun identifying these in flight. But like birds, and as I've described with the vanessids, butterflies have different behavior when they're flying. You can distinguish them, although of course it's easier if they're settled. So the orange tip is the spring butterfly. It only has one brood, emerges round about now from a pupa, which it overwintered, and flies only for a couple of months, and then that's it. The male is obviously the one that's distinctive. The female has black markings on its tip, but both sexes have that beautiful underside, which is very, very typical of the orange tip. Here we have, I'm just going to move the pictures. Here we have a small white. This is a rather more delicate looking butterfly. This sort of pale, almost powdery yellow here, and rather faint, indistinct black markings. And these are flying around now too. Here we come back to the raucous butterflies. This is a common migrant. It does hibernate as an adult in the UK, but it's more commonly a migrant. It has a very rapid flight like a peacock, but actually the underside is quite ornate, and you can often see a slight flash of red while it's in flight, so you can distinguish it from a peacock. This is the early blue we will see soon, the holly blue, often flying around trees and hedges, and also in your gardens. Gorgeous smoky blue. This male is on holly, which is the food plant of the first brood of caterpillars. The second brood feeds on ivy flower buds. And the females have more black edging around the wingtips. What is interesting is the underside of the holly blue is very distinctive. It's quite different to the common blue, often confused, but it's not confusing. And if you recall this when we get to the common blue, so this is a sort of smoky blue with black smudges. Speckled wood, a favorite of mine, haunts sunny patches in woodland. You'll typically see two male butterflies twirling, actually skirmishing around each other up a shaft of sunlight, or basking on a sunny leaf as here. These are lovely pictures. Another underside of a white, this is the green-veined white. If you remember, the small white had that sort of smoky yellow look. The green-veined white has this very typical veining on the underside of the hind wing, and also veining, black veining on the upper wings. They haunt damper margins, and they tend to parole up and down. So they have a slightly different flight from the small and large whites, which tend to be stronger flyers and more erratic. They tend to sort of veer around a bit. Here we have a large white. The numbers of our resident individuals are boosted considerably by migrants from continental Europe in the summer. The males are the same size as the green-veined white and small whites, so small and large doesn't actually help with distinguishing between them. But large whites have a sort of glossier look. I think you can see that the black markings are much more definite than the small white and the green-veined white, and the blackness continues down the side of the wing, as you can see here. This is the female. It has black spots. The males have no spots. This is a gorgeous picture again. Always an excitement seeing this little jewel. Green hair streak. In flight, it's one of the small brown jobs of the butterfly world. But when it settles, usually on gorse or low scrub, we suddenly see the glory of its underside. It's the first hair streak to emerge in April and May, and only has one brood. So it's a short flight period of 6 weeks. We see no more than a handful in any one year in barns, and then only in certain hotspots. Another of the small brown jobs in flight. It's a very fast flyer, this one, and usually you'll catch it just out of the corner of your eye, but if you can keep with it and wait for it to settle, then you can ID it. And it shows this wonderful burnished color. It's an exquisite little butterfly. This is an exquisite picture. The reddish sorrel plants, which we see in May, are its food plant. So seeing these areas tramped out last year was a bit distressing. I'm slightly nervous about how many of the adults we'll see this year. This is the smallest of the brown butterflies. It's called the small heath. It's quite pale. It has a weak flight close to the fine grasses in the acid grassland areas. And it tends to close its wings when it settles like this. One of my treasured memories of a transect walk on Barnes Common is the shock. It was like a shock of coming upon a small colony of 5 of these little butterflies dancing in the low grass alongside Rocks Lane. Sadly, they're declining rapidly. These are common blues, but not so common in London. So we're always very pleased to see these in May, June, and July. They're the blue that you'll see flying over grassland rather than around trees. The male here can be strikingly deep violet, and it has white fringes around the wings. The Adonis blue, which we don't have on Barnes Common, has black markings around the wing and a slightly different blue, but can be very striking. And if you remember the underside, this is the underside of the common blue, which is quite different from the holly blue, if you can recall it. And this one, we were very excited. We first recorded it in 2018. It's originally a chalk grassland butterfly because the caterpillar feeds on rock roses, or usually feeds on rock roses, but it's extended its range because the caterpillars decided to become adapted to feeding on geraniums as well. So that's why we get to see it. At first, when we saw this, we thought it was a common blue because same sort of size, but when it settled, it stayed for its photograph. So that's really quite a sort of behavior that you expect to see. Common blues don't tend to settle around, and they fly away very quickly and erratically at the slightest disturbance, but these guys hang around for their picture. They have no blue against their bodies. Like this, if I go back to the common blue, you can see the female has blue here, whereas the brown Argus doesn't. This is the first of the golden skippers to emerge in about May, June. This is the large skipper. It has dappled forewings here, you can see, and through the hind wings. And they like to perch them. They perch on low shrubs, so that it's perching on a bramble. This is the one grassland species on Barnes Common that requires me to carry a clicker counter. We can see anything up to sort of 60, 70 species on Van Buren, 60, 70 individuals on Van Buren Meadow at any one walk. The males are darker brown, females with more orange. So this is a female. And it has a single spot here, single white spot. When we come to the gatekeeper, you'll notice that the gatekeeper has 2 white spots here. So sometimes you need to have that distinguishing feature because they vary in size. And here we have the painted lady. Such a treat to see this one. This is a regular migrant between May and September. And this powerful butterfly flies from West Africa to our shores over some 6 generations. And you may remember that 2019 was a painted lady summer in the UK, and we recorded 4 in separate weeks on Barnes Common. It's a very strong fly. If you see a butterfly of about this sort of colouring streaking past you in between May and September, it's likely to be a painted lady. And another gorgeous, this is a real summer butterfly, June, July. We'll see it over the meadows, and also the orchard is very good has lots and lots of nectar plants for the marbled white. This has been spreading over London in the last few years. And it's actually one of the browns. It's not one of the white butterflies. It's not a Pieridie. It's one of the browns, but you can actually, although it flies like a brown butterfly, like a meadow brown a bit, you can actually see the white, the black and white checkering in flight if you look carefully. Helps to have some binoculars. Now we come to the ringlet. We don't see so many of these. This is only one brood. Overwinters as a larva, as a caterpillar in grass, and then pupates in June, and then comes out in about July. And this is another real grassland butterfly for Van Buren meadow. It has a rather more bobbing flight than meadow brown, and appears darker in flight, although older ragged ones can be confused with meadow browns. And of course, when it settles, you can see the eye spots, which do vary in size and sex. 2 more golden skippers. Until I think it was about a decade ago, these were considered to be the same species, but now they've distinguished between the small skipper and the Essex skipper. However, it is really quite hard to tell the difference, and sometimes when you're counting, we count small skippers when we're sure, Essex skippers when we're not sure, and small Essex together as one name. If we can't distinguish. This one is definitely an Essex skipper because it's got black on the underside of the antennae. This one, if I saw it like this, I'd call it a small Essex skipper. It doesn't have the black underside, but we can't really see whether it does or it doesn't. Now we come to the 2 other hair streaks we see in Barnes. This one's the white letter hair streak, and this is actually how you will see it. They are not transect species because they naturally fly in and around the tops of trees. But they are recorded sometimes on the transect when they come down to drink or feed, as this one did for Andrew. So at about midday, towards the end of June in 2017, I had my first very distinctive sighting of a couple of small, dark, triangular shapes circling around each other at the tops of the elms on Rocks Lane. These are the males. The females are sitting in the tree. So when we see something like this, when we're monitoring white letter hair streaks, this is a definitive sighting. The caterpillars feed on elms, and between 1996 and 2016, it was assumed a decline of 90% in numbers over the UK because Dutch elm disease had killed off all the great elms, the great English elms, that is. Butterfly conservation therefore made it a priority species, but then realized over the last few years through monitoring that the white letter hair streak was being overlooked and that they were resident among hybrid elms, often used in street planting. So there are a number of street planted elms all over, certainly over Surrey where the work has been done, which have resident populations of white letter hair streaks. I was listening to the leader of this work last week, in fact, the same Bill Downey who walked the transect with us in March 2016, and I could see dots on the map over Barnes where Stephanie and I did some careful monitoring of all the elms in Barnes in 2017. White letter hair streaks are now on the suckering English elms and the wych elms along Rocks Lane, the dead wych elm by Barnes Station, which is very sad because it had quite a few of them, and on the leg of mutton and in the small Prophet Dock garden. So they're quite widespread in Barnes. And this is the third hair streak, the purple hair streak. This is not a transect species either, because again, in high summer, you'll see it flying in and out in colonies of silvery butterflies amongst the foliage and high up in the upper branches of oak trees. And if you are near the great oaks in Van Buren's, in high summer, you might see me standing stock still around 8 p.m. in the evening, counting butterflies. In the hot summer of 2018, there were hordes of these species, and many came down to nectar, which is how Andrew got this picture. This is a female basking in the sun, gorgeous purple on the forewings. The males are brilliant mauve all over their wings. Quite a difficult picture to get. Well done, Andrew. So we're coming, gatekeepers are a sign that summer is moving to the equinox when these burst out. They're smaller than meadow browns, and the orange is more intense. And we actually have had some very high counts. There are two, if you remember, on the meadow brown, there was one spot in the black eye spot. There are two white spots in the black in the gatekeeper. And then there is one slide that we don't have because we haven't photographed it on Barnes Common, and that's the clouded yellow. Very few are seen here, and therefore we have no picture, but we have seen them on, so they're included in the 27 species. I saw one last year in Surrey on Denby's hillside, and they're migrants from warmer parts of Europe, so they don't survive our cold winters. We can record any Lepidoptera we see on the transect, so butterflies or moths. Sometimes it depends on how many butterflies there are as to whether we have time to record the moths. But some of the day-flying moths, of course, are very noticeable, and so we do record them. And this Jersey tiger is very noticeable in high summer, in gardens and all over the common. Used to be confined to South Devon, but has spread, and especially around London. And actually this, when it flies, this has a brilliant flash of orange, and it can be much, much more redder, much redder than that, depending on the individual. Gorgeous, gorgeous, very pretty moth, the cinnabar. And of course, it's caterpillars of the yellow and black on ragwort, which we see in the summer. There are some day-flying moths which can cause confusion with butterflies. So I've just put a couple of these in. One of these is called the Mother Shipton. Moths have particularly wonderful names. And the reason it's called Mother Shipton is because some Lepidopterans decided that the forewings looked like a witch's face. I suppose you can see the nose there, can't you? You see, yeah. Wonderful imaginations. And then a lovely picture of the Burnet companion, also sometimes confused with skippers. But certainly partly because of its sort of very orange hindwings. And this is a bit of a surprise. The London Natural History Society collates the 40 transects done by butterfly conservation across Greater London. Their report for 2019 has just been published, a bit slow, and they record 39 species. So we have a potential for another 13 species of butterflies on Barnes. This is always my hope. So each week's walk always has the excitement of the possibility of seeing new sightings amongst the meetings with old friends. One experienced walker reported a dark green fritillary over the orchard last year, but we couldn't verify it without a picture. But this one is also possible. It's the silver-washed fritillary. It's a photo that I took with an individual who'd flown into our kitchen and was fluttering against the wall, against the window, which was very odd. It was such a surprise. So they are around unless somebody introduced this, which I don't suppose so. And then just to end the butterflies, this is an award-winning shot of Andrew's of a battered old small copper taken in October, the last of the summer butterflies. And I don't want to leave out, I wanted to make a plug for the night flyers as well. One night in July 2018, Adrian and a butterfly conservation person called Les Evans Hill, who helped with our ID, we set up a moth trap in my garden and left it overnight. And in the morning, we had 33 species of moths, which is very exciting. And this is actually a really good thing to do because the moths, of course, come to you. You don't have to go to the butterflies. And it's great for children. And of course, they're set free after we've ID'd them. And these are, again, pictures by Andrew of the various moths we caught that night. So I have actually got a moth trap now. I borrowed this one. And this is my final slide, which is actually showing the iRecord app. This is really effective for what we call opportunistic records, which is a sighting that you can record anywhere, anytime, any place. These records all contribute to our knowledge of butterfly and moth populations. Launched in 2014, we've had over 500,000 butterfly records submitted by 14,000 people. This is the new version, so that if you have iRecord on your iPhone now, it will automatically update. You'll need to get to work out how it actually works, because it's rather different from last year's, and you can also record more, including eggs, larvae, pupae, and also other animal groups. So anybody who's interested. So here we are. I've come to an end. It's definitely been the 45 minutes. I'm sorry. And I'd like to thank you all